A while back, I made a video where I restructured the DCU into the MCU structure, where I had to basically place every single real movie in there somewhere, and add a couple new fake ones, which for the most part are characters that already existed in that universe, restructuring it so that it works and fits better than the actual DCU, and it functions like the MCU did. I got a lot of comments saying that I should have replaced the Doctor Strange movie with a Doctor Fate movie instead of a Shazam movie, because that's the character that fits Doctor Strange the most in the DC universe, and while I do agree with that, I had to place Shazam somewhere because it's a movie that does exist, and those are two characters that are magical, and Doctor Fate doesn't have his own movie, and he doesn't even exist yet in the universe, at least not until Black Adam comes out. But that comment did get me thinking, what if the MCU was replaced by DC characters? Like, what if every single individual movie, regardless of the larger picture of what the DC universe usually looks like, which each individual character was just replaced by their DC counterpart? What would that look like? And let me tell you, it's a very different looking Justice League than what we typically get, although it's actually kind of an interesting lineup. But with that out of the way though, make sure to support me on Patreon if you want to, and shout out to my patrons, you guys are the best. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and let's get right into it, starting with Phase 1 and the counterpart to Iron Man. So finding a counterpart to Iron Man was kind of difficult. I think the character who fits in the best is actually Lex Luthor, at least at the most basic levels. He's also a billionaire with an iron suit, but we're not going to go with Lex Luthor because he is a bad guy, and we're going to have a good guy as the main character here. Steel is brought up a lot as a counterpart to Iron Man, but other than the suit, they don't really have anything in common, which leaves a couple billionaire characters like Batman, who's probably brought up more than anyone as DC's Iron Man counterpart. But I think that they don't really have that much in common aside from the fact that they're billionaires, and that's really it. They're very, very different characters. And I think that the other two billionaires in this universe fit Iron Man better, like Green Arrow, who has a very, very similar origin story, but at the same time has a very different skill set, which fits a different Avenger a lot better, and we'll get to that later, which leaves Ted Kord as Blue Beetle, who I think is the character that fits Iron Man the best, and in my opinion should be the Iron Man counterpart in this universe. He's a billionaire who doesn't have any powers, and while yes, he doesn't have an iron suit, he fights crime mostly with just technology as his main weapon. He has the Beetle ray gun, he has his Beetle ship, which is the things that he mostly uses to fight crime. Plus, he has this mentor figure in Dan Garrett, who was the original Blue Beetle, although in this universe he wouldn't be, like Jensen from the original Iron Man movie. Plus, the next Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes, has a very similar power set to Iron Man, and we will get to that character later. The next movie is The Incredible Hulk, and much like Iron Man, DC never really had a character that fit the Incredible Hulk perfectly. They had these hulking characters like Solomon Grundy and Doomsday. Those characters are bad guys, and we obviously aren't going to go with them. But that is until 2017, where DC had this line of comics called The New Age of Heroes, which was mostly inspired by the Marvel Universe, including one comic called Damage, which introduced a new version of Damage called Ethan Avery, who is very much inspired by the Hulk in terms of his appearance, in terms of his military association. That's what I'm going with here. The second movie in this universe is Damage, which doesn't really make any sense because the MCU started in 2008 and this character was introduced in 2017, but I don't really care. There isn't really another character in this universe that fits the Hulk as well as this one, so I don't really care that he came out 9 years after the original Incredible Hulk movie did. That's what I'm going with. The next movie is Iron Man 2, which is obviously just going to be Blue Beetle 2, but Iron Man 2 also introduced two new heroes, War Machine and Black Widow. The Black Widow counterpart will be Black Canary, who is going to be the counterpart to Black Widow in the entirety of the universe, which I think it's pretty obvious why. And then the counterpart to War Machine is going to be a character who is less associated to Blue Beetle than War Machine is to Iron Man, just because Blue Beetle doesn't really have any sidekicks other than the next Blue Beetle, but we're going to get to the next Blue Beetle a lot later. For now, I think that the counterpart to War Machine could be Captain Atom, who is associated to Blue Beetle in the fact that they're both from Charlton Comics and Earth 4, and the fact that Captain Atom is also this silver character who works for the most part with the military, much like War Machine does, and honestly I think that fits pretty well, better than I would have expected. The next movie in the MCU is Thor, another character who doesn't really have a good counterpart in the DCU, at least in terms of 100% being its counterpart with the same exact power set and everything. Mjolnir specifically is very unique. The fact that Thor is a part of this pantheon of gods, that can definitely be replaced by like Orion or even Wonder Woman, but it's Mjolnir that brings up a bit of an issue because you can never really have that moment in Endgame where Captain America uses Mjolnir, because DC doesn't really have any items like that, except for maybe a Green Lantern ring, but Green Lantern is not at all similar to Thor in the slightest, other than the fact that they both use items as weapons. So that leaves me with, I think, two options, Wonder Woman or Orion, and I think making a Wonder Woman trilogy would be a lot easier, and Orion is maybe a little bit too connected to the Thanos counterpart, Darkseid, because Thor wasn't really connected to Thanos at all until Infinity War. So yeah, the Thor trilogy will just be Wonder Woman movies, coming out a couple years earlier in this version of the world. The next movie is Captain America: The First Avenger, the final movie before the Avengers movie, and the counterpart, it had to be like the most patriotic character in the DC universe. There isn't really an America character. I think that the most would probably be Uncle Sam, but Uncle Sam I don't think works as well as Commander Steel, aka Henry Haywood, who was also a superhero in World War II who gets enhanced. His enhancement is that his bones are turned into steel. And even his costume is similar enough to Captain America, with like the colors inverted. He's more red than blue, but they do both have the star right in the middle of their chest. Commander Steel is definitely going to be the counterpart to Captain America. The problem there is that Commander Steel has like no stories or no supporting characters other than his grandchildren, the other Commander Steels, Citizen Steel, Captain Steel, and just Steel. So that's going to be a bit of an issue, but we'll have to work around it. But that brings us to the Justice League, which has a lineup that's very, very different from a typical Justice League. The lineup includes 3 heavy hitters of Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, and Black Canary, a not-so-heavy hitter in the Justice League, which is the Ted Kord Blue Beetle, and then 2 characters who have never been on the Justice League, the Ethan Avery version of Damage and the Hank Haywood version of Commander Steel. I actually think it's a pretty cool looking lineup. It's a lot cooler than I would have expected, and there are a lot more heavy hitters than I expected as well. Probably should mention this, but Green Arrow would somehow, some way debut in the Wonder Woman movie, because Hawkeye did debut in the Thor movie with this small cameo. That brings us to Phase 2, starting with Iron Man 3 and its counterpart being Blue Beetle 3, which would just be a regular Blue Beetle movie featuring Blue Beetle and Captain Atom. And that's really all we need to know about it. Iron Man 3 wasn't really all that significant for the larger universe. There's also Thor: The Dark World, which also wasn't really that significant other than introducing an Infinity Stone. But the DC Universe doesn't really have any Infinity Stones, so there would be a little bit less of a connected thread throughout this universe. But we do have the second Wonder Woman movie, which is just the second Wonder Woman movie. Not really anything to mention there other than that. Then there's Captain America: The Winter Soldier, with its counterpart being a Commander Steel sequel, which I would call Commander Steel Legacy, something that Commander Steel has a lot of in the comics. He has this son and 2 grandchildren that took over the role of either Commander Steel, Citizen Steel, or Steel, and I think that this movie could focus on at least one of those. I think it could introduce Citizen Steel, his grandson, as the counterpart to the Winter Soldier, maybe even as a villainous character for a bit, but then he does turn good in the end. And also you'd have to have a counterpart to Falcon, which would be Hawkman, really honestly just because they both have wings and they could fly. I know that those characters are very different in terms of origin story, but I couldn't really find any character that fit Falcon well from the DC Universe, and Hawkman is also a bird-based character who can fly, but this I guess would be a version of Hawkeye who has a very different and more simple origin story than the one in the comics. The next movie is Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a group of characters that have a bit of a connection to Thanos in the MCU because of Gamora and Nebula, and the fact that they're in space, and the fact that they come in contact with with one of the stones, the Power Stone. So I wanted this counterpart in the DC Universe to also have a connection to Darkseid. So naturally I looked at the New Gods, and there is a group of heroes from the New Gods called the Forever People, which I think works well, but I also would change it up a bit because the Guardians of the Galaxy in the MCU is very different from the original Guardians of the Galaxy in the comics, so we could switch it up a bit here as well, where you have a couple of members from the actual Forever People like Mark Moonrider and Beautiful Dreamer, but then also some more notable and different characters like Mr. Miracle, who would be the main character like Star-Lord, Big Barda, as well as Forager. Those 5 characters would make up the Forever People in this version of the DC Universe, and you'd have other members like Viking and Big Bear who would join in later, that is, in the sequel, the Forever People Volume 2. Then we get to Justice League 2, which would have to be similar to Age of Ultron, and that would mean it would introduce a lot of new heroes, 3 to be exact. The counterparts to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch could have, I think, been the Flash and like Raven or something, just based off of their powers, but instead of basing it off their powers, I based off the fact that they're both from this fictional country of Sokovia, and the fact that they're siblings, and because of that I went with Geoforce and Terra as their counterparts, with this movie taking place mostly, at least in the final act, in Markovia, and Geoforce does die. One of the main reasons I did this, other than the ones that I already mentioned, is because Terra, like Scarlet Witch, does become a villain later on, and I think that works pretty well. The fact that they're both siblings, the female one becomes a villain, and they're from this fictional country in the comics. There's also the Vision counterpart, which would either be Martian Manhunter or Red Tornado. Martian Manhunter fits better power-wise, but Red Tornado fits better origin story-wise, so I think I'd go with that. Red Tornado is the counterpart to Vision, meaning that the Justice League lineup in this movie is Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, Damage, Commander Steel, Green Arrow, Black Canary, Geoforce, who dies, Terra, and Red Tornado, with Hawkman and Captain Atom also joining in, but very, very briefly at the end of the movie. Which, again, just an insane lineup for the Justice League that I don't hate at all. It's very, very unique. And rounding up Phase 2 is the counterpart to Ant-Man, which is obviously the Atom, but it's going to be the Ryan Choi version of the Atom, which I feel like I've said in so many movies, just because the Ant-Man movie decided for some reason to go based off of the Scott Lang version, the second Ant-Man, so we're going off of the second Atom as well, which is Ryan Choi, with Ray Palmer being the predecessor and the mentor. So the first movie in Phase 3 is Captain America Civil War, and seeing as this is a one-to-one comparison, this movie would be Commander Steel Civil War, and would see the Justice League split into 2 teams fighting over the Superhero Registration Act, the 2 teams led by Commander Steel and Blue Beetle. Team Steel would be Commander Steel, Green Arrow, Citizen Steel, Hawkman, Atom, and Terra, and Team Beetle would be Blue Beetle, Black Canary, Red Tornado, Captain Atom, the second Blue Beetle, and Vixen. Those last 2 are going to be the counterparts to Spider-Man and Black Panther. I'll go over why when I get to those movies, but in my opinion, Team Beetle is a way more powerful team, so that's a bit unfair. But what you're gonna do, this is a one-to-one comparison, nearly regardless of the power level of those characters, at least for the most part. And that brings us to the reason I made this video. The counterpart to Doctor Strange is Dr. Fate, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. I really want to see a Dr. Fate movie in real life, a lot more than just him being a side character in the Black Adam movie. So maybe we'll get that eventually, but in this weird universe, we got it in 2016, and it's pretty great. Then there's Forever People Volume 2, the counterpart to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which is exactly what I said earlier. It's like basically just a sequel with a couple extra heroes. You got Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, Mark Moonrider, Beautiful Dreamer, Forager, Vicken, and Big Bear, all fighting some villain from the New Gods. It doesn't really matter, but Darkseid would be looming over them the entire time, setting him up for the Infinity War counterpart. So it's just a coincidence that it turned out this way, but I honestly believe that the best counterpart to Spider-Man in the DC Universe is the Jaime Reyes version of Blue Beetle, and it's just a coincidence that I think also the best counterpart to Tony Stark is, other than Oliver Queen, but he fits somebody else better, Ted Cord. And it's crazy that it came out that way, because in the MCU, obviously Iron Man and Spider-Man have a close connection, something that they don't really have in the comics. So I think it turned out pretty well, where you have this trilogy of movies with Ted Cord as the main Blue Beetle, then you introduce this other Blue Beetle, who is obviously the counterpart to Spider-Man, Jaime Reyes. who in this universe is being mentored by the first Blue Beetle, just because Peter Parker was mentored by Tony Stark in the MCU. In any other universe, because Tony Stark and Peter Parker don't really usually have this close connection, this wouldn't work as well, but here it actually works pretty well, and this is the counterpart to Spider-Man Homecoming. And as a side note, just as an excuse to talk about it, there were recently released set photos from the Blue Beetle movie coming out next year, which I'm really excited for, and the suit looks so good. It's so accurate to the comics, and this is all practical. None of this is CGI. This is set photos. This is what it looks like in set photos. Just imagine how cool it will look in live action, in like with CGI enhancing it as well. I'm so excited for that movie. Then there's Thor Ragnarok, with its counterpart being Wonder Woman 3, which would also feature damage in some way, in some capacity, and also because it introduces Valkyrie, we could introduce another character from the Wonder Woman mythos. So let's say that Wonder Girl is introduced here, the Donna Troy version of Wonder Girl, because why not? The next movie is Black Panther, and because of the Civil War movie, you already know that its counterpart is going to be Vixen. Now, I already know a lot of people in the comments are going to say that I should have done a Red Lion movie, because that's a character who is very similar to Black Panther. He has a very similar costume. He's also the king of a fictional African country. The difference is that he's obviously a parody of Black Panther, and he's a villain. So, just like I didn't go with Lex Luthor, I'm not going with Red Lion either. And I think Vixen works because while she isn't like the queen of an African country or anything, she does come from an African village called Zambezi, and honestly, if she wanted to, she can use the powers of a Black Panther from like the real animal kingdom. So I think that's the closest counterpart possible to Black Panther. Aquaman would have worked as well too, but Aquaman fits another character from Marvel a lot better, and that's Namor. So I didn't go with Aquaman, even though those two movies are very similar, Black Panther and Aquaman. I'm going with Vixen in the end. And that brings us to the Infinity War counterpart, which is just Justice League Darkseid War, just because Darkseid is also the main villain here as well, so there's no reason to change something like that from what it is in any other video I made on this topic. But the lineup here is crazy. The Justice League aren't obviously fully assembled here, just like the Avengers weren't fully assembled in Infinity War, but the heroes featured in this movie are Blue Beetle, Commander Steel, Wonder Woman, Damage, Black Canary. Green Arrow's not there because Hawkeye wasn't there, and for some reason Black Canary is there but Green Arrow isn't. Terra, Red Tornado, Hawkman, Captain Atom, Citizen Steel, Jaime Reyes is Blue Beetle, Vixen, Dr. Fate, Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, Mark Moonrider, Beautiful Dreamer, Forager, Viking, and Big Bear. But after that, we do have Ant-Man and the Wasp, which would be Atom and Bumblebee, which is another thing I heard a lot in that last video, that the sequel to the Atom movie should have been called Atom and Bumblebee, which is weird because in the comics they don't really have much of a connection to each other. But I guess here Ray Palmer is black, and he married a woman named Beecher, like her last name is Beecher, and they had a daughter together, but he became estranged with his daughter, and that daughter's name is Karen Beecher, and that daughter does become Bumblebee. So in this universe, Bumblebee does have a connection to Ray Palmer and the Atom, and this movie is called Atom and Bumblebee. The next movie is Captain Marvel, and it's pretty easy to find a replacement for Captain Marvel because DC has a Captain Marvel of their own. In fact, they had it before Marvel did, and that's the Billy Batson Captain Marvel / Shazam. But just like Marvel decided to completely skip the original Captain Marvel from Marvel, we're going to be skipping the original Captain Marvel as well and going straight to the first female one, which is Mary Batson, the main character of this movie. Billy Batson would probably have a role in this movie at some point, maybe mentioned as the original Shazam, but he's not going to be the main character, and he's not going to be featured in Endgame either. It's going to be Mary Batson. That brings us to Justice League Endgame, which starts off with half the heroes dead, but then they go into this time travel adventure with the help of, honestly, no idea, because none of the characters in this version of the Justice League have time travel powers, but maybe with the help of the Atom, just like it was with the help of Ant-Man, where he gets like Kronos' technology of time travel, because Kronos is an Atom villain who can time travel, so let's go with that. That's something that I went with in my last video as well, so why not? But in this movie, Black Canary dies, and also Ted Kord dies, the latter of which is very fitting. Ted Kord having this sacrificial death at the end of this movie, it works really well for Ted Kord as a character, not only because he already has a different Blue Beetle to take over the role, which is Jaime Reyes, which is also going to be the next movie, but also Ted Kord is one of those characters who dies in most of his continuities and most of his adaptations. He died in the comics and was dead. It was dead for a while. He died in the Brave and the Bold, Batman the Brave and the Bold universe, and stayed dead. And that's a kids cartoon. He also died in the Young Justice universe and is currently also still dead. So Ted Kord dying is something that happens a lot, and I think it works really well. Honestly, this is probably the thing that works the best out of the entirety of this universe. The fact that Ted Kord is the replacement of Iron Man, and he dies right after Jaime Reyes becomes Blue Beetle as well, and also imparts a bit of wisdom and mentoring him for like a year, and then dies, and Blue Beetle, the Jaime Reyes version, is now the main one, and like the face of this universe. I think it works really well. And finally, we have the second Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle movie. I don't really know what it's gonna be about. I don't know what it's gonna be called, but that's what we're doing here. It's gonna focus on the fact that Ted Kord died and the responsibility that Blue Beetle now has upon his shoulders as basically the most famous superhero in this universe at this point. Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman does exist, but the Flash and Green Lantern and Aquaman. So at this point, they don't exist at all. So Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle is the most famous superhero in this universe at this point. And everyone loves Ted Kord's Blue Beetle more so than like anyone. But yeah, that's the MCU replaced by DC characters like one for one. I think it's an interesting universe, but a very incomplete DC universe if that's what we were going with. So let me know in the comments down below what you would change about this video and about this restructuring. And if you really want to, let me know in the comments down below what you think Phase 4 should look like. I'm not going to be going over Phase 4 probably in any video, unless this video gets like 100,000 views, then I definitely will do it. But it probably won't, and I'm not going to make a Phase 4 video. So let me know in the comments down below what you think Phase 4 should look like and what you would change about it. But make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. Support me on Patreon and all that jazz. And let me know and also ideas for potential videos like this one, because these are like some of my favorite videos to make. Bye.